Evolution. It's how life on Earth went from a single-cell organism millions of years ago to the human species today, along with countless other species. Dozens of theories existed over the years throughout the latter part of what is known as the Enlightenment era, until one day, a man by the name of Charles Darwin published a book called The Origin of Species. In his book, Darwin describes the finches of the Galapagos Islands and their varying beak formations. He theorized that their beaks were the result of what he called natural selection. His idea was that those finches whose beaks made eating the various nuts, berries, and/or bugs on the island survived to pass their genes on to the next generation. This process progressed until it got to the point where there were individual species of finches, all with different beaks specifically designed for their different food sources. Another example would be two lions. One lion has weak teeth, and the other has strong teeth. When chewing on a bone, the weaker lion breaks his teeth, therefore unable to hunt and survive. The second lion, on the other hand, has stronger teeth, and therefore survives and reproduces by not losing his teeth. In this situation, the lion with stronger teeth is able to pass on his genes, while the weaker one and the weaker tooth gene is lost in time.
Evolutionary psychology is the approach of explaining human behavior based on the combination of evolutionary biology, anthropology, cognitive science, and the neurosciences. It is a way of thinking that can be applied to any topic within psychology. What distinguishes evolutionary psychologists from many cognitive psychologists is the proposal that the relevant internal mechanisms are adaptations, products of natural selection that helped our ancestors get around the world, survive, and reproduce. Evolutionary psychologists maintain that there is an analogy between organs and psychological mechanisms or modules. Organs perform specific functions and are products of natural selection. There are no general purpose organs. Heart pumps blood and liver detoxifies the blood. The same goes for psychological mechanisms. They arise as responses to specific contingencies in the environment and are selected for the extent that they contribute to survival and reproduction of the organism. Evolutionary psychologists are usually less interested in human characteristics that vary due to genetic differences because they recognize that these differences are unlikely to be evolved adaptations central to human nature. In contrast to sociobiology and behavioral ecology, evolutionary psychology emphasizes that organisms are adaptive executors rather than fitness maximizers. Organisms have emotional, motivational, and cognitive adaptations that generally increased inclusive fitness in the past but may not do so in the present. Evolutionary psychology's psychological mechanisms are the correlates to instincts or drives. The psychological mechanisms that they invoke are computational, sometimes referred to as Darwinian algorithms, or as computational modules. This overt cognitivism sets evolutionary psychology apart from most of the work in neurosciences from behavioral neuroendocrinology. This theory is illustrated by Tooby and Cosmides. Their essay, The Psychological Foundations of Culture, from 1992. This essay unified the science into a self-believing entity. 1. The brain is a computer designed by natural selection to extract information from the environment. 2. Individual human behavior is generated by this evolved computer in response to information it extracts from the environment. Understanding behavior requires articulating the cognitive programs that generate the behavior. 3. The cognitive programs of the human brain are adaptations. They exist because they produce behavior in our ancestors that enabled them to survive and reproduce. 4. The cognitive programs of the human brain may not be adaptive now. They were adaptive in ancestral environments. 5. Natural selection ensures that the brain is composed of many different special purpose programs and not a domain general architecture. 6. Describing the evolved computational architecture of our brains allows a systematic understanding of cultural and social phenomena.
Luke just wants to fit into the group. Let's see how he does at a party.
Can I come in?
That didn't go so well, so let's add beer to the mix.
Dance like your life depended on it.
What's up? Got the beer!
Luke's desire to fit in helped the group, which helped ancient humans survive. Mom, no, it's not crabs. Mick, how about some more examples?
Well, hey, there's examples of human evolution everywhere. Let's go and see some of our own.
John Tooby and Leda Cosmides, having both studied at Harvard University, are now the new leaders in the new field of evolutionary psychology. Their main focus is on the brain and how it functions like a computer. Another main view of evolution comes from David Buss. Buss looks at evolutionary psychology on sex differences and mate selection. In Buss's Evolution of Desire, he looks at mating strategies, conflicts between sexes, and social reputation. Similar to mate selection, he looks at how a partner dumps a mate.
Buss's theory is based on a series of logically consistent and well-conformed premises. 1. That evolutionary processes have sculpted not merely the body, but also the brain, the psychological mechanisms it houses, and the behavior it produces. 2. Many of those mechanisms are best conceptualized as psychological adaptations designed to solve problems that historically contributed to survival and reproduction, broadly conceived. 3. Psychological adaptations, along with byproducts of these adaptations, are activated in modern environments that differ in some important ways from ancestral environments. And 4. That critically, the notion that psychological mechanisms have adaptive functions is a necessary, not optional, ingredient for comprehensive psychological science.
When looking at other leaders in the field of evolutionary psychology, Richard Dawkins comes to mind. He introduced the term meme, which is the behavior or style that passes from person to person within a culture. Dawkins' main view was that the gene is the principal unit of selection in evolution. Francis Collin also looked at genes as he headed the Human Genome Project, which the main goal was to determine the sequence of chemical base pairs which make up DNA. His view was that God created us through evolution, and that it is not our bodies doing this themselves. Robert Burgess did not concentrate on genes. He looked at the human locomotion, which involves how humans went from walking on all fours to walking in a bipedal motion. Doing this, it freed up our hands for us to carry and pick up objects. Robert Kurzban looked into the evolutionary approach to understanding human social behavior, looking at how humans try to fit into social situations.
Social evolution or cultural evolution is the process in which we as humans interact and communicate with each other. From our earliest beginnings, we needed interaction with others because we evolved to become a communal species. In the beginning, this meant that nomadic tribes of about 10 to 25 people to gather and hunt for food. In this nomadic society, we raised our children to be strong and knowledgeable in all areas in which were necessary for the survival of both the group and themselves. As we developed new technology for the domestication of both animals and plants, we had less of a need for hunting and more of a need of people to lead and uphold laws for our growing centralized population. This forced a major shift from hunters and gatherers to organized government. These shifts drastically changed how we raised our children. Compared to the nomadic society where all children were raised to provide for the group as a whole, this group raised their children to master one profession that is used to provide for their own family. This also brings a major shift in how children see each society, view both the world and their fellow man. Today we see changing culture moving faster than we do physically. An example of this can be seen in just 3 generations. Our grandparents were raised in a society where racial tolerance was never enforced. Now compare this to your parents' generation with the rapid social change for peace, equality for the tolerance of all. Now compare this to our own generation where we have accomplished what our grandparents believed would not happen in their lifetime, the election of our nation's first black president. All of these little cultural shifts drastically change how we see and interact with the world around us, and then in turn changes how we show our children to do the same.
Funnel-shaped ears channel noise into the brain, which makes for better sound acquisition.
Hey, very sexy.
What? I heard everything. Evolution and natural selection don't always work perfectly. Sometimes there's a little bit too much energy about change for actual progress to happen. trachea and esophagus cross at the back of the throat, which makes for some nasty implications.
Oh my gosh, are you okay?
You see, you still got the girl. No natural selection for her. Man. Shit. Find my center.
Go.
Hey, some scientists believe that snoring while asleep scared away predators at ancient humans' most vulnerable time.
Look at this baby. This baby is adorable. Unfortunately, its head is too big to fit out of its mother's birth canal. Ugh. But evolution has solved this problem long ago. The plates in the baby's head have not fused all the way together, which allows them to slide one over top to shrink the baby's head, allowing it to fit all the way out. Later, in adulthood, the plates fuse together, allowing for better protection of the cranium.
So, let's review what we learned today. From its beginnings with Charles Darwin to Dawkins and the modern evolutionists of today, the evolutionary theory of development has rapidly grown and changed in its short existence. It has grown into not simply a theory of its own, but a broad theory that applies to all areas of development. We showed how it started within the theory of natural selection and how it grew to be applied to psychological development through the instincts and drives that we developed over time. Richard Dawkins, David Buss, Robert Burgess, and other evolutionists added their own spins and contributions to this theory, such as Buss's theory on jealousy and relationships between men and women. Finally, it has been applied to our behavior and social interactions with one another and our need to be accepted within groups. As we have shown, the evolutionary theory of development has come a long way. However, this is still a very young theory and still has a long way to go.